at the bottom of your screen if you enable them. If you have any questions at all during the Zoom, please use the Q&A function to submit them. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Louise to start the call. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. My name is Louise Atkinson. I am National President of the National Education Union, and I just want to welcome you and thank you to coming to another very important Zoom briefing for the NEU. We are sorry it's been called at late notice, and I know that for most of us it's the last week of the term in school, but things have been moving really quickly, and we thought it was really important that we call this meeting so that you can hear all of the details. The meeting this evening is being broadcast live on all of our socials, and it will be recorded as well. The behaviour statement has been posted in the chat as usual. I'm going to hand over to Mary and Kevin in just a second to talk through all the details of the offer and what that means for you as support staff. And we will have some time for questions after they've spoken, so please do put your questions in the Q&A function. And as usual, we will get through as many questions as we can, but if we don't answer them all tonight, we will be collating them and they will be used to update our FAQs on the microsite. You are about to get a lot of detailed information, very important information, but all of that also is available on the microsite, so you don't need to worry about taking lots of notes as Mary and Kevin are speaking. So I'm going to hand over first to Mary this evening. Thanks very much, Mary.
Thank you, Louise, and good afternoon. Sorry, is that okay? Good. Can you hear me? Great stuff. Okay. I just got really bad echo then, so I thought, oh, is it something I'm doing? But I'm okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and it's great to see so many of you on the call. You know, I do hope that you're limping towards the end of term like we are, and that you're looking forward to a good rest in the summer. In this meeting, we're going to take you through the pay offer for support staff and what is likely to happen with that. We're going to take you through the teacher pay offer and the implication of that for support staff terms and conditions, and the implication for the wider issue of school funding. So, and we're going to take you through a survey which we are launching this evening with our support staff members. So I want to first talk about support staff pay. The first thing that's really important to remember is that support staff pay runs from April to April. It runs through the financial year, whereas teacher pay runs from September to September. And that support staff pay is determined by the National Joint Council, the NJC, and the current unions negotiating on that are Unison, the GMB and Unite. Now, the NJC, the employers, made a pay offer in February for 2023 to 2024, that's April 23 to 24, and that offer was for an increase of £1,925 to be paid as a consolidated permanent addition on all NJC pain points from 2 to 43 inclusive. This is a pro rata payment for employees classed as part-time. That means that you get paid pro rata this increase for the hours that you work, and a further increase of 3.88% on all allowances. So if we translate that flat rate offer into pay rises, that will translate into pay rises of between 9.42% at the bottom of the pay spine to 3.88% at the top, that's the spine point 43. That's for the very best paid council employees. And we have full details of what the pay offer means for our support staff members on our website. For most school support staff, the flat rate offer represents an increase of between 6 and 8%. And overall, that is slightly better than the offer, the government's improved offer to teachers.
But you haven't seen that extra money yet. It's not in your pay packets yet, because Unison, GMB and Unite were trying to get it improved. We were supporting them in that. They were trying to get it improved, and so they haven't agreed it in negotiations. However, those unions have been consulting their memberships, and it now looks extremely unlikely they'll be taking any industrial action to seek to improve the offer. Unison, you may have seen this, they balloted the whole of their membership covered by the NJC. That's the council staff as well as the school support staff. So they balloted all of them. Their executive recommended a vote for strike action. and they got a 75% yes vote, but they got a 31% overall turnout, and they disaggregated by employers, and there's not enough employers, we think, through the threshold for them to take action. So we think it's unlikely that Unison is going to be taking any action over the pay. Unite has got a ballot which closes on July the 28th, so that's a week Friday. But what we think will happen is that the NJC will meet shortly after July the 28th and probably vote to accept that the pay offer that Mary just went through. GMB haven't yet started their own statutory ballot. We're not quite sure what GMB is doing there, but we think there's a likely scenario where the union side will meet after July the 28th and accept the arrangement, probably not in time for anything to get into August pay rounds. So probably this money will arrive in your pay packet and be backdated, but probably arrive in September or October. But to just go through, Mary's done the headline of that, but I'm going to say something about the particular detail and where you might be on it. This is all on our website, by the way, but there are a lot of particularities. First of all, pay rates are set locally. So what a TA earns in one part of the country can differ, sometimes by quite a lot, from what is earned by a TA elsewhere. Now, we object to that. We think there should be national rates, but at the moment they are set locally like that. So all of this has to be read with that in mind. The percentage rises that I'm going to talk about should still be the same. Secondly, I just want to acknowledge that many of our members, school support staff, talk about job creep, that their head teacher asks them to do more and more, but doesn't necessarily pay any more for it. And that's something that we object to and think there should be defined job roles as well as defined pay rates. And then it's also worth saying that you have to be on a 52-week contract to get the whole of that flat rate amount. And only about 30% of our members who are school support staff are on 52-week contracts. And we think term time only working is not something we're happy about. More than 50% of support staff, school support staff, are classed as part-timers, meaning they're not working 37 hours a week in most of the country, or 36 hours a week in London. And again, that impacts on the actual cash, how much of that cash from the 1,925 you would get. It should mean the percentage rise is the one I'm going to talk about in a minute. And then another little bit of a complication is that flat rate of 1,925, that's the rate for outside London. They're slightly higher rates for inner London and outer London. The details are all on our website. And then I'm going to go through the grades and tell you what the range of percentages are. But these are the minimum and the maximum, and you might be on the minimum of your grade, you might be on the maximum, you might be somewhere in between. So there is complication. So we think it's worthwhile talking through, but you might well want to look at the detail on the website. So for the job descriptions for an entry-level teaching assistant, our calculations are that the percentage pay rise will be between 8% and 9%, depending where you are on the scale. So between 8 and 9% for an entry-level teaching assistant. Not in your pay packet yet. You'd expect to get it backdated in September or October and then backdated to April, but like 8 to 9%. An experienced TA, their increase is about 7% to 8%. That's because the flat rate amount is a bigger percentage of a lower salary. So entry-level TAs 8 to 9%, experienced TAs 7 to 8%, cover supervisors about 6.5 to 7%, HLTAs 6% to 7%, science technicians 7% to 8%. So we think they'll all come through, be backdated to next April. Those are the sorts of levels. So slightly more than teachers are getting as percentages, but we all know school support staff are paid a lot less than teachers. So, you know, even a bigger percentage doesn't mean there's bigger cash coming to you, but the percentage rises are better than the teachers.
So that's a support staff. It's complicated. That's a support staff pay offer. The teacher pay offer in some respects is less complicated. And that's because teachers have national terms and conditions, although they can vary them in academies. Very few academies actually do that. So on Thursday, the 13th of July, the government published a school teachers review body report into teacher pay. And we now know that that report recommended that teachers be awarded 6.5%, 6.5% pay increase from September. Crucially, for support staff, the government have confirmed dedicated and extra funding to properly fund the teacher award. So what extra funding has been offered? £900 million extra funding year on year for schools to pay for the extra 3% of teacher pay. And that extra 900 million is on top of the 2 billion increase to school funding that the government was forced to announce in its autumn statement last November, after we wrote to all Tory MPs in October, showing them the relaunched School Cuts website. So that 2 billion included in it sufficient funding to make the government's initial 3.5% pay offer for teachers, and it included the funding for the National Joint Council NJC pay offer for support staff, and to make it affordable for most schools. Now, the head teacher unions, ASCL and the NEHT, have told us that with the 2 billion funding that was received by schools in October, and with the extra 900 million, which will be year-on-year increase that we achieved through the latest round of negotiations for the teacher pay offer, they've told us that both pay offers should be affordable for most schools. So the pay offers for support staff and the new pay offer for teachers. And in the course of negotiations, we've received firm guarantees that this extra money will not come from any frontline services, including services which we know are absolutely integral to support staff work, including special educational needs. They won't come from the money spent on school buildings or repairs, which are in a dire strait, but the money that was allocated for that stays the same. And the extra funding will not come from maintained nursery or 16 to 19 funding provision. And where the money does come from, it's important you should know that, is it comes from underspends in the department's budgets. For example, on the apprenticeship levy and other underspends. Now, normally those underspends have to go back to the Treasury. Departments aren't allowed to keep the money that they don't spend. But in order to fund the teacher pay offer, the department is being allowed to keep any underspends. And that means that this will be new money going into school budgets. So we know that during the course of the teacher strikes, many support staff refused to cross picket lines. And we know that many of you took action with your teacher colleagues. We know that many others of you supported your teacher colleagues taking strike actions in any way you could. And we really want to thank you for that. That solidarity was immensely important to the union and to your teacher colleagues. So thank you for doing that.
So Mary's been through that. The head teacher unions tell us that head teachers have budgeted on had budgeted for 3.5% for teachers, and then the pay rise is coming in above that. The government's put extra money, but head teachers will have budgeted for these local government, for these NJC pay offers as well. Those are the figures that government used in working out the funding for school. So we think these pay awards are funded, but there is an important caveat to that, because we would never say that properly funded pay rises solve all the problems of underfunding in our schools. No funded pay offer is going to reverse in the 13 years of neglect and lack of funding that this government has given to our schools. So we're not saying there will be no funding problems in schools, we're saying the pay rises are funded. And what we are saying is that we have achieved a major breakthrough on funding, that we've got a win of £900 million, and that's due to the action of NEU members, the teachers who took the strike action, but also the fact that we are currently balloting you, and the fact that the other unions said they would ballot. The government was worried about the prospect of head teachers, NEU support staff, NEU teachers, all taking action together in the autumn. We think that's why they've made a change. There is another issue with school funding. is that we have a system in this country of local management of schools. They don't have this system in Scotland, for example, but it means that school leaders have all the control over their budget. So if a school leader has taken on a lot of staff, they may not have the money to cover them on some level. So sometimes there are issues that come up at school level. Now, we've got the government to put aside £40 million for an emergency fund to cover some of that. But if a head teacher is behaving badly, we also will act to support our support staff members. We'll demand to see the school finances, because it is a fact that nationally we can see that school reserves are going up, that schools in general are not spending all of their income every year. So if there is a problem, that's where we start. There's the £40 million reserve fund. We've won the £900 million to go in. We've got this £40 million emergency fund, but then we'll say to schools, we want to know where your money's going. Are you saving money? Because you shouldn't be saving money. You should be spending it on your staff. We'll fight for support staff. We'll hold local ballots. We'll pay strike pay for people to take action. And we've done that and succeeded at that many times in the past. Now, we want to talk for a minute about the fact that we're going to launch a consultation with you about this offer. We're going to talk about that. Mary and I are recommending that you accept the offer. But we have out our national ballot of support staff, and we've been urging you to vote in that, and we are still urging you to vote in that. We are balloting support staff on the question of school funding and proper funding for pay rises. We are not balloting on the question of pay itself, but on the funding of pay rises. We were campaigning and threatening industrial action to ensure that any deal we reached on teacher pay, or if the other unions managed to get an increase in support staff pay, that would be funded and not threaten your terms and conditions. Now, we're going to urge you to vote in the consultation on the government offer, but we also urge you to carry on voting in the postal ballot. Whatever happens, if there's an accept vote, we still want to say to government, we passed the thresholds, we could have taken strike action. You were right to worry about us. You should worry about us in the future. So we want you to vote in that strike ballot. We also want you to vote in the consultation on the government offer. We began the process of consulting our teacher members on the pay and the funding offer yesterday. From tonight, at the end of this call, we're going to start consulting our support staff members in schools, but we're only asking you to vote on the funding part of it. We're not asking you to vote on the teacher pay rise. That's for the teachers to decide on their attitude to that. But we're asking you to vote on the funding part of it, because that's our dispute that we've been balloting you on. Our legal dispute with the government is on their failure to provide adequate and sufficient school funding, in particular for fully funded pay awards, which leads to potential worsening of employment terms. It's important that we say that, because there's a legality to the dispute. So we want you to carry on voting in that ballot, but we also want you to vote in the consultation. We're going to say to you that you should vote accept, and Mary's going to say more about that in a couple of minutes.
So yeah, thanks for that. I'm going to say more about that now, right now, not in a couple of minutes, straight away. So you've received your voting links. You will receive your voting links by text and by email this evening, immediately after this call finishes. So make sure that you have your say. And as Kevin said, we recommend that you vote to accept that these offers are properly funded. We recommend that you recognise that through your actions, through your campaigning, through the work of the union, we've achieved over £3 billion of extra funding for schools and colleges. And by your support for the teacher strike, and by your willingness to ballot in the support staff vote, you've increased pressure considerably on the government. And that is what has forced this government to really significantly increase its funding for schools. £3 billion is a considerable sum. As we said, it can't solve funding pressures in each and every school. Because of local management of schools, that's not possible. But the overall envelope for school funding has increased really significantly because of the NEU and because of your campaigning. And we know that this funding is essential to secure support staff and teacher jobs in our schools and colleges. Your national executive, the NEU national executive, has agreed to put this significantly improved offer to members. And we are recommending that it's the best offer that can be achieved through negotiation. We believe that to try to get more, we would need a significant escalation in strike action. And actually, with this government, with an ideologically cemented Conservative government, which did not want to give teachers 6.5%, which really did not want to give £3 billion extra funding to schools. They're very cross that they have to do that. That this government now says that that is all that they are prepared to do. And frankly, we think, you know, you would need continuous strike action in order to move them. And we just don't think that there's any sign that members are willing to do that. But we have achieved with teachers and support staff pay awards which are properly funded. So there can be no economic argument to make cutbacks in staffing in schools of teachers or support staff. And that should mean no redundancies and no reduction in hours for anyone because of the teacher and support staff pay offers. There may be arguments around redundancies and jobs because of overall funding levels. But as Kevin has said, if that case is being made, then we will look at those books school by school. But in terms of the support staff and teacher offer, those are properly funded and they should not worsen the funding situation in our schools. If there's any local attempts to waver from this, the union will endorse joint teacher and support staff industrial action to enforce it at school level. But before we finish and answer your questions, we do want to say how proud we are of our support staff. You do such important and such essential work. And we know that your teacher colleagues value and know your worth. They know that their job would be virtually impossible without you. And they have been very concerned in considering whether or not to accept the teacher pay offer, to consider its impacts on your work and your conditions. And finally, we want to say that this is the last time we'll talk to you as Joint General Secretaries. When the NEU was formed, we were always clear, Kevin and I, that we wanted support staff to be an equal part of our union. We know that in schools and in colleges, teachers and leaders and support staff act as one team. And we are very proud, and we think you should be proud, of the work that you do for your pupils and the support and help you give to teachers and leaders. You are highly skilled professionals, and the NEU will always remember and always recognise that.
Thank you very much, Mary and Kevin. There was clearly a lot of information there, and it is complicated. And I did personally start making notes because I know there are some members in my skill that have asked some questions of me already. But I'm not quite sure my notes are going to make much sense. So I have seen the link has been posted in the chat for the website, and I'm going to certainly go and double check on the website after we finish this call this evening. So it's over to some questions now, if that's okay. And we have had a lot of questions coming in. So we've kind of tried to group them and sort of put similar ones together. So I'm going to do a round of 4 to begin with, if that's okay. So first question is, are you sure that the offer is fully funded? And then the second question relates to that, where has this funding come from? And then the third and fourth question, what happens if teachers accept and support staff reject? And then the fourth one is the reverse. What happens if teachers reject and support staff accept? Who would like to go first?
So those are really good good questions. I'll do the first 2 and I'll leave the tricky ones to Kevin because I got in first, so I can, you know.
Brilliant, thanks, Mary.
Now that we're leaving, we can be mean to each other, haven't been nice to each other for all this time. Sorry, that was my phone. It's connected to my iPad, but so now we can be mean. So I think we've explained in this talk that we are sure that the offer is properly funded, both for teachers and support staff. We can track the money that we have managed to get into school budgets. We can track the means by which that money is transferred into school budgets. There are different tracking mechanisms for academies and for local authority schools. And we are confident that schools have been given proper funding in order to fund the support staff offer and the teacher offer. And I think we've also been clear about where the funding has come from. So the 2 billion in October came from an extra grant to the Department for Education, the 500 million extra for teachers this year, and the 900 million every year thereafter comes from underspends in the departmental budget. But actually, because those underspends don't have to go back to the Treasury, they're funded for this year and for next year, and then they're built in the department's baseline budget. So we are confident that the support staff and the teacher pay offers are properly funded. We don't use the word fully funded because that would mean that you have to take into account local management of schools, and head teachers have a huge amount of discretion about how they spend their funding. So we can't guarantee against the very few head teachers who don't spend their funding wisely and well. But we also know that reserves in schools nationally have increased actually quite significantly since the pandemic, and paradoxically, particularly in primary schools. So primary schools now are running reserves nationally of over 4%, secondary schools just a bit less. Now, it's important that schools run reserves, but we think those should be capped at 1 or 2%. You know, leaders should be spending that money, and they shouldn't be running big reserves and cutting support staff hours and support staff jobs, because you know that after the pandemic, after COVID, children are coming into school with greater needs than ever before, and greater needs for the support that support staff can give them if they've got SEND, if they've got social anxiety, for a whole range of reasons. Children are coming in with much greater needs, and they need support staff to do that work with them and give them that individual help, individual encouragement that they need. So we are clear that there is no reason for anyone to say that support staff, the support staff offer and the teacher offer isn't properly funded. It is. We can't absolutely say, we would never say that they correct the decline in school funding over the past 13 years. But we will say this year we have made a massive inroad into that decline, over 3 billion extra funding in schools and colleges. And that is at the beginning of a restoration of teacher pay. Now we've got to go further, not teacher pay, on school funding. Now we have to go further on that. We have to go further on restoration of school run funding, proper restoration of teacher pay, proper restoration of support staff pay. But these offers, we are confident in saying, are properly funded.
So I've got the other two questions, and just to repeat the questions to you, first of all, they are: what happens if teachers accept the offer but support staff reject the offer? And the other way around, what happens if teachers reject the offer and support staff accept the offer? But let me just start by doing the easier examples. Mary and I both hope that teachers accept and support staff accept. If we do that, then what we think we've done is we've made some progress. We've got the government to move in ways that people didn't think was possible. We've got them to move on the teacher pay rise, and we've got them to move on the funding of it. And that would be a good place for us then to go into a campaigning phase in the new year, to think about the future, to campaign on funding and on pay, but not using industrial action in that next bit. If teachers reject and support staff reject, then that's quite easy to understand what would happen, although I think it'd be very difficult to do it in practice. The executive would call for sharply escalated industrial action. They're talking about plans like 1 day, 1 week, 2 days on strike the next week, 3 days the week after that, 4 days the week after that, or plans like 5 days during the Conservative conference and 5 days during the budget. So it's that sort of thing that will be put forward. Mary and I don't think that's a good option. We think it'd be hard to get members to do it, and we're worried the government wouldn't move even then. But that's if both do the same thing. Now, if teachers reject the offer and support staff accept, then we just call on the teachers to take that extended action without asking the support staff to do it. So that's quite easy to understand. I think the most difficult one to think through is if teachers accepted, so we wouldn't be calling on any strike action from them, but support staff rejected the offer, because then if we pass the threshold on the support staff ballot, We can't say that we've done that yet, but if we had passed it, then we could call strike action of support staff alone. And our executive would have to give serious thought to whether they were going to do that or not. If they had the ballot, they could do it legally, but they'd have to give serious thought to whether they would do it, because it doesn't feel like the other unions that are organising support staff are going to be calling any strike. So it'd just be NEU members, NEU support staff members, and not NEU teachers. So that would be quite a difficult place to be, I think. I know that was a complicated answer, but I think I got all the bits of it in there.
Yeah, I think you did absolutely brilliantly. Thank you very much, Kevin. That was really clear. So I've got another set of 5 questions this time, if it's okay. Question number 1, what if schools still attempt to make redundancies? Second question is, are support staff getting 6.5%? And question number 3, does it mean that the NJC offer is fully funded too? The 4th question is, are we going to consider taking action over the NJC claim? And what about the recognised unions? And the 5th question, aren't both NJC and teachers' offers below inflation? Who wants to start us off on those ones this time?
Do you want to do question 1 and 2? Oh, you want to start? You go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, go on. You do questions 1 and 2, then I'll do the others.
All right.
Yeah, I'll be nice to you. So, I'll change from being mean to be nice to you. I just have a sudden change of heart, Kevin.
Yeah. If schools make redundancies, now that schools will make redundancies, will start to make redundancies for all sorts of different reasons, like falling roles. Like there's less children in the school, they consider doing it in those circumstances, for example. Now, the union will always engage, talk with the head, seek to understand why they're making a redundancy, try to ensure if there is a redundancy that it's not compulsory, that there are sometimes people who want the redundancy payment, so to go for voluntary redundancies. But if there are compulsory redundancies, the union systematically, if members in the school want it, will ballot for industrial action. And the point of that industrial action will be to get the head teacher not to make compulsory redundancies, to find an alternative method, waiting longer and waiting for voluntary, moving money from one part of the school budget to another. But we take strike action to avoid compulsory redundancies. When we do that at that local level, we offer full pay strike pay. We take a bit of your subscription every year and we put it in a bank account that is our strike fund. And there's enough money in that to pay for local strike action, and we can pay full pay. And the threat of that full pay, head teachers know we can then do the strikes for quite a long time. That quite often makes them give way before strike action. Unfortunately, our strike funds are nothing like enough to do strike pay for national strikes, but for school level strikes, we can do that. And the second question here is, are support staff getting 6.5%? They will all get, almost all of them will get 6.5, and in all categories, in any local authority school, and in the vast majority of MATs, they follow those terms. But the question is, when will it come? Because the offer has been made that is more than 6.5 for everyone, was made in February, but the Unison, Unite and GMB haven't yet accepted it. So the employer hasn't paid it. Now, we know that Unison aren't going to take action to make it, try and get it to more. So we think they will accept it soon. And then it will be in your pay packet, and it should be backdated. And we expect that will be in September or October. But we're a bit at the mercy of the decision making of other people before that happens. But we expect that almost everyone will get more than 6.5 and 6.5 or more, and that will arrive in a backdated form in September or October.
Thanks, Kevin. So there are 3 more questions. The first one is, does it mean that the NJC offer is fully funded too? I've explained the difference between fully fund and properly fund. But yes, both ASCL and the NHT, the leaders' unions, have said that the Funding for the NJC offer was calculated in their budgets. That's part of the 2 billion that we achieved for schools in October. And remember that the NJC made its offer in late February. So school leaders have had just as much time to budget for that NJC offer as they've had to budget for the 3.5% of the teacher offer. And ASCL and the NHT have confirmed that money is there and that their members have budgeted for that. So are we going to consider, the fourth question, are we going to consider taking action over the NJC claim? What about the recognised unions? I think we've explained, sometimes these questions come in before we do the explanation. We've explained that we think it's unlikely that Unison will be taking action based on their ballot result. The GMB haven't started to ballot yet, and Unite will know about their ballot result at the end of next week, but Unite have a very small membership of school support staff. Their membership is much more within other forms of local authority work. So given that the GMB haven't balloted, given that Unison have balloted but haven't met the threshold for taking action in most employers, and given that Unite have only got a very small percentage of school support staff, we think it's likely that they will accept the NJC offer, and that money will then be backdated and paid into your pay, given to you into your pay slips. And are both the NJC and teachers' offers below inflation? For the NJC offers, but the teacher offer, yes, is below inflation. It is below inflation. Inflation currently is about 8.7%. The teacher offer is at 6.5%. Inflation is coming down gradually. So yes, it is below inflation. For the NJC, it depends which grade you're on. The lower grade, the higher the offer, but it depends which grade you're on about whether or not it's below inflation. But both of them are, we think, significant offers. For teachers, it is a significant restoration of their pay. It's not full restoration of their pay. And for support staff, the offer is slightly better, and it's a significant restoration as well.
Thank you very much, both. Okay, so I've got 4 more questions, if that's okay. And we are getting a little bit tight on time. So I am going to go to Kevin for the first 2, if that's okay. And then I'll give Mary the second 2 questions. So Kevin, would any local action in response to the above include both teaching and support staff? So this is talking about redundancies on individual school level. Would that be both our teachers and support staff there? And the second question is, does this mean that the ballots are now closed? And I think you did speak about that, but I think some clarity on that would be really useful. Yeah. And then Mary, why should we encourage members to still vote if they haven't already? And what are our next steps to address the historic real terms pay cuts? Thanks very much, Kevin.
Okay, so local action can be just support staff, or it could just be teachers, or it can be teachers and support staff members of the union. There are legal steps we have to go through and create the right dispute, but we can do it in any of those formats. And we are taking action where teachers are taking action to support staff at the moment. And so that both are possibilities. Support staff members talking to teacher members is a really important part of working out the best way of taking those things forward. The ballots are not closed. Our teacher ballot closes on July the 28th. People are still voting in that ballot. Our support staff industrial action ballot closes on August the 12th. That date might be wrong. It's the Friday. It closes on the Friday, and we're going to announce the result on the 14th, which is the Monday. So maybe that's anyway. It closes just at the end of that second week and I wonder what
it's the 11th.
Friday the 11th of August.
Friday, the 11th.
It closes on Friday. So the support staff industrial action ballot closes on Friday the 11th of August. Mary and I are urging you to vote in both the industrial action ballot. We are urging you to vote yes, and the consultation ballot, where we're urging you to accept. Now, why do we do those things? They're slightly in contradiction. Well, we think you should accept, but we also want government to know that if they hadn't moved, that we would have passed the threshold amongst support staff, that we could have taken industrial action, because we want them to have some concern about what the NEU will do in the future. We want them to know that the NEU can pass national thresholds on teacher ballots and support staff ballots, because that gives us more leverage with the government in the future. And also, if there are reject votes, then it gives us a ballot for industrial action. But we, just to be clear, Mary and I are urging an accept vote, but also urging you to vote in the strike ballot.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Mary, do you have anything to add as to why people should vote? And then can you tell us a bit more about the plans?
So Kevin's answered the question why I encourage members to vote. Kevin's just said we want the government to know that we are capable of passing the thresholds on a national ballot, both for teachers and support staff. But we're urging you to accept that these offers are properly funded for support staff and pay, get them paid into your bank account. And then the last question is, what's our next steps to address the historic real terms pay cut? Well, we continue with our school cuts campaign. We continue with the historic 13 years of underfunding of our schools. We continue raising that with MPs, raising it with parents, raising it with grandparents. We have a greater social weight than any other union because we are rooted in our communities. And we continue to fight for better funding for schools and colleges, better pay for education professionals, teachers, support staff and leaders. And that fight will continue because you know that Kevin and I will be leaving as Joint General Secretaries at the end of August. This is our last Zoom call to you as support staff members, but that fight will continue under Daniel as your new General Secretary and Niamh as your Deputy General Secretary. So we're very confident in the future of the NEU and its fighting for support staff members and all of its members.
Thank you very much, Mary. Kevin, have you got a couple of words you want to add just to wrap up?
Just to say, I've really enjoyed being Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. I spent my life in education, being a trades unionist, fighting for advance for teachers, for support staff, for the kids that we teach. One of the things that I'm proudest of about the new union, the NEU, because I was General Secretary of the NUT briefly before the NEU, and the NUT did not recruit support staff. And I am so proud that the NEU is open, that support staff join the NEU. We have these arrangements currently with the other unions where we don't actively recruit, but support staff are joining us all the time. And I'm very proud of the work that the union is doing and will continue to do. I think that's the right time for an education union. So thank you for joining the Zoom call tonight. Make sure you vote in both in the consultation and in the ballot. We're urging you to vote accept. We have made progress. We have moved the government in a way. I mean, the pay offer isn't for teachers, doesn't match inflation, but that's the way of looking at where it is compared with prices. I also look at it as they said 3.5. We got them to 4.2. We've got them to 6.5. They said they were going to put 150 million pounds in. They've put 900 million pounds into school funding. We have moved them a long way, and they're a hard government to shift, this Tory lot. They're very hard to shift. I think we should be proud that we've shifted them.
Thank you ever so much, Kevin, and thank you, Mary, as well. I know you have both worked absolutely tirelessly. You always do, but particularly over the last few months and this last year. So thank you for everything that you do for our union as well. And Kevin, you're absolutely right to say, you know, we are the National Education Union. We have stood together. We have stood strong. That is our teacher members and our support staff members. And, you know, we have won this. It's not the end of the fight. It's not ideal, but it is absolutely a win because we are strong as the National Education Union. So I just want to mention we do have another Zoom tomorrow evening for sixth form college colleagues. So if you know any colleagues, you want to direct them to that, it will be at 5 o'clock tomorrow evening. As Kevin said, don't forget to vote both in the online consultation, which should be getting your link out via text from 6 o'clock this evening. Now, when mine came out, it didn't come out for a few hours, so don't panic if it doesn't come straight away. We have a lot to send out, but it will be coming out from 6 this evening. and also the postal ballot on funding. The closing date for that is Friday the 11th, but realistically it needs to be in the post box by Wednesday the 9th in order for it to get to us in time. I also want to thank our tech team this evening. I know all of the staff at the NEU have worked really hard over the weekend, putting information together, and worked hard behind the scenes this evening, putting this Zoom together. And thank you to Nikki Evans, our wonderful British Sign Language interpreter. And most importantly, thank you to you all for joining us this evening. And we hope you have a lovely holiday. But do get those votes both in the post and electronically. Thank you for joining us this evening. Good night.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Nikki.